You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, your most authoritative news analysis show. And I've got some of your messages from the very first issue that we're discussing. Is it this one says that I agree with Kweku Bako, and this is coming from Kingston. He's in Kumasi. I agree with Kweku Bako. Community policing can take care of a greater number of people, and that was the focus of Mr. Frimpong. In the advanced countries, the patrol team will stop and inspect the inside of vehicles and licenses of every driver at certain times in the night. They escort people to their homes for those not driving too. By doing so, they are able to tell suspicious characters and those that also do not belong to the neighborhood. Can't we do same here in Ghana? A good question that you ask. And then this one says, MPs don't talk about personal security when they go about asking for votes. They should try going on house to house or door to door campaigns with public funded security, and we shall see. What exactly do you mean by that? Zankawa Sanusi Chris, sending that from far away in China.
Is it a threat?
Yeah, it sounded almost like a threat, and that's why I was asking what particularly it was about.
If you have gone on house to house like me and have tragic incidents, you say what.
And then this one says that, well, there are a good number of, we have lower court judges. They are in, we have a lot of them in the country. They don't have security protection. We should also be discussing them as well, and not wait until something happens to them before we take care of them. But also, collateral to that question is that if we want to take care of the MPs and all of these people, then we can imagine the implications financially for the state. Can the state afford it? And those are some of the questions that you are sending in. Now, let's now deal with this issue that came up in the course of the week. And as you know, the ICH, that is the Interconnect Clearing House, has become an issue. The Ministry of Communication through the NCA, National Communications Authority, did, go through a process by which there was supposed to be some bidding. Bidding went through, and then there was also a selection of some 5 entities to bid for that contract. Out of the 5, there was a panel that was set up, an evaluation panel that was set up. They did their job and produced a report, and that report puts one of them, that is Afrowave, as the winner of the contract. Now, Immani has stumbled on one of those reports and has put it out. Well, there are questions about the report though, and has put it out and suggests that something very fishy has happened. We'll get into all the details about that. But joining me first on the line for a very brief chat before we go into all the issues that we have to deal with on this matter is Paul Adom Ochre. You know him very well. He's a host of Good Evening Ghana, but beyond that, he consults and also does work as well for the some of the entities that are involved in telecom operations in Ghana. Good morning and welcome to the show, Paul. Hello, Paul.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Samson.
Right,
good morning to all your panelists.
Good to have you. You have some very deep insights about these matters, and we wanted to find out from you briefly what for you is the major concern about the Afriwave contract.
Well, thank you very much. I've just taken a personal interest as well in things that the Ministry of Communications do, basically because they are the industry regulators and bosses. What I have found is that the report that you referred to, which has come out, and we know that the NTA in their press conference indicated that the part of the report, the scores, which Immani complained about, may have been of some transpositional errors, etc. My concern is not really about that. My concern is that if you look at the report, what they did is that they did quite an extensive and comprehensive job. by assessing each of the 5 candidates, I should say, on 3 major bases. The first one was legal and management. The second one was technical capabilities, and the other one was financial capabilities. In the report that I have, they outline how they did the assessment and the kinds of questions that were put and the kind of inquiry and the investigation that was done. And then after each of these steps, they pass a verdict. So when you look at the report, it will say that for legal and management, we looked out for ABC. Company Y brought us XYZ in fulfillment of the requirements of ABC. And after that, they will pass a verdict and say that after we looked at it, this was our conclusion. So they do that for all of the companies, and they do that for all of the categories. And so that's why I say it's quite comprehensive. My concern is that when you read some of the things that the report have said about some of the competitors, you will find that what they have said does not sufficiently justify the outcome, because the verdict that they pass on you, on a candidate for the legal and management, they will, when they finish that, they score it mathematically on a table, and they give what they call the maximum score, and then they show what each candidate was able to achieve by scores, mathematical scores in numbers. So you will read the verdict that they have passed, and then you will see at the end of the page the score that they gave.
Can you give me an example of what you're talking about?
I'll give you an example.
Right.
So, for instance, in the terms of legal and legal management, they were asked for, in the ABC that I talked about, companies must be at least 70% Ghanaian owned. And so they assessed all the companies by their company registration documents to make a determination whether they were 70% Ghanaian owned.
Right.
So they made that determination. Then when they came to score that, you will see that in the verdict for Afrowave, for instance, they say that Afrowave is a wholly Ghanaian owned company, 100%. And so Afrowave fits the purpose. You will see that they say the same thing about Suba. That Suba is also a 100% Ghanaian owned company. So they also fit the purpose. When it comes to the scores, the maximum achievable score is figure 4. They score Afrowave 4 and they score Suba 2. And if you look at that, immediately you begin to wonder, because they have used the same words to describe their verdict. The verdict is basically the same, similar words. Mm-hmm. And they score one 4 and they score the other 2. You can't. It's completely quite difficult.
Are you saying that you don't find an explanation for that score?
That's the point I'm making.
Okay.
Because when you look at the report, if you look at the report in detail, you will go to the place where they talk about the company changing hands in terms of Suba from one person to the other.
Right.
But then eventually they come to a final paragraph where they say that all those documents that indicated and manifested the changes from one person to the other were all provided by Suba. So essentially, the job was done.
Yeah, they say they were provided by Suba, but provided at what time, what point in time? And didn't that matter?
I can read it to you because they say eventually they did.
Right, they did. Yeah, they said so.
Yes, and if you look at Afriwave, you will see the same concern about company changing from one ownership and adding some ownership, and then eventually they also produce the document.
No, in Afriwave, there's no change. There was only an additional there was a
re-registration.
You see?
You will find in Suba.
Yeah, it is in Suba that there was a complete change of the two.
Yes.
As in Mr. Japan and the wife.
You will find a re-registration.
Yes.
But the point is, the verdict that they opened the paragraph with, the verdict is that they found that Suba was 100% Ghanaian. That's the verdict.
Right.
Because of the nature of the job the panel did, the comprehensive nature of the job they did, they also provide how they arrived at that conclusion.
Right.
So it is that's what you and I seem to be talking about.
No, but are they marking them? Is the marking only in respect of being compliant on 70% Ghanaian owned, or there are other factors? Because when you look, there are actually other factors. It's not only about the ownership. And this is what they said. For example, still on the legal management, they say that Operation Support Plan or OPS, they say at a point that they say that on Operation Support Plan, applicant, that is Suba, applicant provided evidence of valid CVs of proposed key personnel. However, on service level agreements, applicant failed to provide evidence of agreement with a key technical partner, Ericsson AG. We must indicate, however, that at the oral presentation, a representative of Ericsson, a member of the Sube's team, informed the panel that Ericsson, by its practice, does not sign agreement with its partners. It, however, submits offer letters for acceptance. The chairman of Suba confirmed that he had received such an offer from Ericsson. The panel subsequently requested for a copy of the offer letter. The panel, however, received an offer dated January 13, 2015 from Suba, indicating that the document was not in existence at the time of the oral presentation. So the panel, therefore, decided to disregard the offer letter in its evaluation of Suba's application. Don't you think this is what may have affected Suba's grading as against Afriwave?
No, it couldn't have, because if you look at the table has different categories for the same legal and management.
Okay.
So you will find that the categories are as follows: evidence of company registration. So they are scoring only that, evidence of company registration. The criterion score is 1, and Afrowave gets 1, Suba gets 1.
Okay.
Then you look at the next step. It says evidence of 70% Ghanaian owned. So that is the only thing they are scoring in that category.
Right.
And the maximum score is 4. And it says show evidence at least of 70% Ghanaian shares in the company's regulation code.
Right.
That is the only thing they are scoring. And Afrowave gets 4 and Suba gets 2.
Okay.
So the point you are making is actually of not significant consequence to this particular column.
Okay.
Because they are scoring it singularly.
Right.
The singular score for evidence of 70% Ghanaian company is 4.
Okay.
That in that 4, whereas they say that both companies have 70% Ghanaian ownership and they have qualified that.
Okay.
Indeed, both companies have 100% Ghanaian ownership.
Okay.
They are able to score Afriwave 4 and score Suba 2.
Okay.
That is the contradiction.
Right.
The point you made is correct.
Which is the next big issue for you?
Okay, the next big issue for me then comes to the financial services.
Right.
The financial capability of the companies. And my worry is that the kind of verdict they pass on Afriwave is somewhat damning. And if you look in total, they say that the financial capabilities will weigh 40% of the max. That's 40% of the 100. And technical capabilities would also weigh 40% of the 100.
Legal takes 20%.
Management will be 20%.
Right.
So in respect of the 40% of the management, the kinds of things they say on page 32 about Afriwave, some of which are that the company was in a negative financial position, that the company its shareholders was bad. The company basically was broke. All of that is okay. But there's another part that really, really worries me. There was projections that the panel required the candidates to present to make a projection of how they will run the business, how they will run the ICH. So Afrowave did make projections, and also all the other candidates made projections. And then they passed a verdict on those projections. Now, if you look at the verdict they passed on Afrowave's projections, they say as follows, that Afrowave did not submit projected balance sheet and profit and loss statements. Hence, our inability to assess the projected financial statements in respect of the projected return on equity and the projected working capital. And what this means is that the projections that Afrowave made about how they'll run the business, the panel was unable to assess it because Afrowave did not present the relevant documents for that assessment to be complete.
Okay. Now, comparatively, they assess Suba to very high marks in this regard, and you say, and you say that's the problem.
In this regard. Sorry, they assess Suba high marks in this regard. They assess Afrowave negatively. If you look at it at that stage, it is difficult to see how the one they assessed that could not even submit balance sheet projections so that the panel could make a sense of the projections, that they eventually became the winner.
Yes, but is it not important also to note that in assessing Suba highly of being very profitable and having had, profit almost consistently comparative to Afrowave, which had a declining, return all the time. On the projected financials, what they say about Suba is that if Suba Info Solutions submitted 10-year financial projections for the proposed project, the financial projections encompass projected profit and loss, projected balance sheet, and projected cash flow. Assumptions underlying the financial projections were not quite reasonable. Doesn't that, strike something to you?
It does. It completely does.
Yeah.
And what we are saying here is that it's not that somebody else should have won. What we are saying here is that, so you compare the two. Suba made the projections and they said...
Oh, no, I thought rather that the argument is that Suba rather should have won.
Not quite. We can't say who should have won, not at this stage.
Okay.
But what we are saying is that if you pass this kind of verdict on one candidate and you tell us that he has won, that's incongruous.
I see.
So they said Suba's projections are not reasonable. Suba submitted the evidence and the relevant documents. They looked at it as a panel and came to the conclusion that that's not reasonable. In case of Afriwave, they said they were unable even to assess. They were unable because Afriwave did not present anything. So one presented, the panel said it's not reasonable. Another could not even present it. So the panel they don't know. They are emasculated from being able to know anything because the people, they couldn't bring the relevant documents. But they are the winners of the license and of the process. That's the concern. I mean, maybe there's some more evidence, there's some more information that we don't have. Maybe the report that we are reading is not correct because we didn't get it from the NCA. Maybe the NCA has another report in terms of how these verdicts may have passed or may have changed. Because they've told us now that...
From what I understand from my reading of the report, when they say Afriwave did not present projected balance sheet and profits and loss statement, is that the full gamut for this particular area? Because they speak about the fact that they had presented, their financials in support of what they were going to do. They had Huawei, who had also, submitted their letters in support and so on and so forth, and had unexpected profits, that they intended to make. The company expects to make an average profit margin of 40% for the projected period. So is it really the case that they did not submit anything at all for that area?
Okay, great. So all what you are saying is what Afriwave told them. The projections of 40% and all that. So the projections were made. So if you look at the page 33, you will find that what I'm reading is the final paragraph. So that's the verdict.
Right.
That's the verdict. That's why it's the final paragraph.
Okay.
So they said everything they would say, and then you say everything and leave it to the panel and give them the documents that the panel is looking for. When you have gone, the panel now sit down and make an assessment of what you were saying.
All right.
And this is the verdict they pass on everything that Afriwave said. And in fact, they couldn't even assess it. Because they couldn't present a projected balance sheet, projected profit and loss. They couldn't even assess it. They couldn't do it.
Okay.
Now, if they couldn't do the assessment, and this is 40% of their marks, so how does the candidate actually emerge victorious?
Okay. Thank you very much for your insights, Paul. My guests are ready to do justice to the rest of the issues that have been raised by Immani and other persons like your good self. Thank you very much, Paul.
It's a pleasure. I'm still watching and listening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I don't know. I don't know who to start with. Maybe I should start with you.
We are the media.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Right, because I had direct questions for Immani. And there was an Immani rep that was supposed to come in, but unfortunately, we don't have the person in. Yes, because I've read their concerns, and then on the basis of that, I also decided to read the complete report and ask myself the questions whether all the issues Immani were raising were accurate, placed against the details of the report. Because I found that there appears to be a certain emphasis on the scores rather than the detailed report itself. And Paul just did a bit of that.
This is something, even an emphasis on the scores, completely belie the claims of Immani and all those who are happy now. So
How do you say that?
Let me explain it to you. I beg you. I need to do a brief background in order to put the issues in context.
Right.
Now, it was government's policy to establish what we call an interconnect clearinghouse.
Right.
Simply means that instead of telcos communicating among themselves individually with regards to interconnectivity, we need a centralized system for that to be done. Beyond that, there were 14 other services that the Interconnect Clearinghouse is designed to undertake.
Monitoring of volumes of traffic for service providers.
Routing or switching of traffic between 14 of them. The two that are best known are revenue assurance. In other words, among the telcos, disputes have arisen as to how much is due. And indeed, there's an instance where one telco blocked another because they could not agree on how much was owed. And then government's revenue, in terms of core traffic, was also guaranteed if we had a centralized system. They also have what they call the equipment identification registry, so that when your phone gets missing, it can be traced. There's a mobile number portability capacity. There's also SIM box fraud that can be checked. So there are 14 things that the Interconnect Clearinghouse does. Now, they needed to issue a license. Again, people say that this is a procurement. It's not a procurement. It's the issuance of a license to an operator to carry out this activity. It has been said that we breached the Procurement Act, or that the NCA breached the Procurement Act. This activity of the issuance of a license is governed by what we call the Electronic Communications Regulations 2011, or LI 1991. Sections 91 to 100 state clearly what ought to be done if a license is to be issued. Now, this license is called a Class 1 license. Now, the relevant portion of this law is found in Section 95C. It says that the number of Class 1 licenses that may be granted for the public communication service is restricted under any enactment or under the direction of the authority. That is, the authority shall grant a Class 1 license by public tender. You are required to tender. Now, the only reason why you are required to tender is that the service will be restricted. In other words, out of those who apply, only one will emerge. So if one will emerge, then do a tender. The LI goes further to clearly dictate what should be done as per the process leading to the award of the license. Now, the LI says that in Section 96C, that the authority must set up a bid reception and evaluation committee to consider the tenders. So on the basis of this authority, the NCA set up such a committee. They gave them terms of reference. If you check the terms of reference, the NCA said, among others, that the AEP, that is the Application Evaluation Panel, will be expected to develop its own scoring and derive evaluation matrices, methodologies, weighing schemes based on the key requirements mentioned below. So the panel had the right to establish its own rules.
That's not in contention.
Again, to be able to do this, they undertook an extensive process. They did public consultations with Parliament. They spoke to the telcos. They spoke to civil society organizations, including the Telecoms Chamber. They held stakeholder consultations with other groups. And then on the 2nd of December, they issued what they call the request for application for the grant of license to operate a clearinghouse. This request for application was available on the NCA website. It's still there. Anybody can check it out. Now, all interested parties were required in Annex A, Section 5. It says applicants must exhibit evidence of parties with which they have entered into agreements, arrangements, or understandings which relate in any way to the license being allocated. Now, as per the terms of reference, the committee then proceeded to set out its rules, and this is captured on page 12 of the report. That is Section 2.5.1. I'll come to a claim about pre-qualification, but let me look at the rule. The AEP decided that all documents submitted on or before 17th December 2014 would be reviewed and full marks may be awarded if the requirements are met. Documents received after December 17th, 2014 and dated on or before January 12, 2015 would be reviewed and full marks will not be awarded if the requirements are met. Documents dated after January 12, 2015 would not be considered for evaluation. Documents received after January 13, 2015 were disregarded. Now, this is important. I'll come back to it to answer some of the claims that Paul is making. Now, Immani has put out a number of claims, and they have been repeated by some media persons. You see, I regret to have to be very blunt with you, but this is a pack of lies cooked up by Immani to further the interest of an aggrieved client. There's absolutely no basis.
Thankfully, we have raised the Immani, someone from Immani
I would have loved
who will respond to you.
I would have loved to finish it.
Who will respond to you. Yes, go
First
ahead.
of all, Immani says that one, for such a complex undertaking, the 21-day timeline was too short. First of all, what is the basis for that claim? Between the NCA, that has existed for nearly 2 decades, and has done this all this while, and Immani, who has capacity to determine how much time they need. I thought this is an award of a license.
No, but
the
panel itself admitted to that.
No.
The panel said they were disappointed in the quality of what was submitted, and they think that part of the reason for that could be the short period.
No, you see something. This is the award of a license.
So Immani
listen something. All the criteria, all the requirements were fully advertised. So anybody interested in applying would have been minded to prepare himself to make a tender and then appear before any panel if they were invited to do so.
Right.
So you cannot agree to be part of a process and later turn around to complain about the shortness of time.
No, I'm not saying that. Yes. I'm not saying that the competitors complain. I'm saying that the evaluators themselves, the panel, had that you see, the made panel, that admission.
You see, it's not an admission, it's an observation. But the point is that all those who participated in this process were aware of the duration. They were given a deadline, 17 December, by which they should have submitted a tender. Nobody compelled them to engage in it. So once you were mandated to take part in it, and guidelines had been issued, which was public knowledge, they should have kept to the guidelines and decided either to tender or not. The second point,
Felix, what I'm saying is this, that if you read page 51 to 57 thereabouts, this is what the panel itself said. General observations and comments. The application evaluation panel made the following general observations. 1. Generally, the quality of the submissions was below expectation. This may be as a result of a misunderstanding of the requirements of the RFA, which is the request for application, or the brevity of the time frame allotted for submission of application. So they made that.
Yes, but either way, I'm saying that either way, the parties involved were aware of the time involved and ought to have gotten their acts together.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
don't think it lies in the mouth of Immani to pass this verdict. The second point is that Immani claims that the evaluation panel itself admitted in its report that no pre-qualification was done. So in addition to the NCA never having reviewed the report of the evaluation panel, the panel also had no prior guidance whatsoever. That is patently false. Again, if you check page 12, this is what the evaluation panel says. The AEP observed that the administrative pre-qualification of the applicants required in stage 1 of the process had not been done by the commencement of its work. The AEP decided that the two stages be combined into one process for the purposes of evaluation. Pre-qualification simply means that they check your documents against a checklist. So have you brought a tax clearance certificate? Check. Do you have a company registration certificate? Check. Do you have a SNIT certificate? Check. Yeah. And have you paid your application fees? Check. Your tender documents, are they in order? Check. You can do it administratively. That is, before the panel starts this way, you can look at it. Sometimes you can be disqualified at that stage. Or when the panel sits, they can look at it and then proceed. So the panel did pre-qualification. The results of their pre-qualification is captured on page 14. It is here. When they did that pre-qualification, Afrowave scored on all the requirements. There was a problem with Sube's, what do you call it, tax clearance certificate. They later brought a letter saying that it was the fault of the GI. But whatever it is, as of the time pre-qualification was done.
They didn't come saying was the fault.
Yeah, they brought a letter.
They brought a letter saying that from the Revenue Authority.
But whatever it is,
the Revenue Authority admitted
yes,
that
but
the
whatever
fault
it
was
is,
theirs.
But the point I'm establishing was that there was pre-qualification. The Immani claim that there was no pre-qualification is false.
Right.
The claim also that there were no visits to the applicant's operational locations.
Fiscal
You
inspection.
see, again, I know what has happened behind the scenes, so I know why Immani is making this point. But you see, it's an irrelevant point.
Answer to that first. No fiscal inspection.
Yes, it was not required. You see, it is the first time that we are doing an interconnect clearinghouse. No Ghanaian company has rendered that service in Ghana. At least those who came to bid had not demonstrated anywhere that they had rendered such a service anywhere in the world.
But what you are looking for in the interconnect clearinghouse, Suba has competence for some aspects.
Exactly.
Major aspects.
No. You see, the basic requirement is that you must have had some experience in communication service delivery.
Okay.
So Suba is doing only a few out of 14. So strictly speaking, if site inspections were to be the case, it meant that every company coming must show that it can do all 14 as we speak. but it was not a requirement because it was a new license.
Okay.
So it was your financial and technical presentation that was used to assess your ability to do. And the clearest answer to that is that today, as we speak, Afriwave has installed the switch through their partners Huawei and are able to do the work. That is the clearest answer to that claim. So the fact that they didn't go to do site inspection does not mean that they could not have done it. They have proven that they can do it. The other point is that there were no client references or testimonials. In the submissions that they presented, they were asked to show what work they had done. The first point is that ICH is a novel service. So they have not rendered that to any client. So what reference are they talking about? The other point is that some of the criteria were blunt instruments. Again, it's a bizarre conjecture. It's a bizarre conjecture. There was a company, KNet, that was part of another company called Prodigy that bidded.
Yes.
KNet is already doing work for the NCE in some service aspect. So the panel decided that no, that amounts to conflict of interest. You are already doing something that will be used.
And you have been told
and you have been told clearly ahead of time.
Okay.
So there was conflict of interest. So what is Immani's
what they are saying is that that conflict of interest claim is not a just ground.
But how did it undermine?
Because if they give the example,
how did it
if
undermine?
I had a license from the NCA to operate a radio station, and now I'm coming into this, where would the conflict of interest be?
They were not that broad. If you read the reports, the panel zoned in on KNet services, which in any event was going to be relied on at some point by Prodigy if they had won.
Right.
So they didn't make a generic claim about conflict. Now they say the meet, and they from number 7 to 15. All these are patent falsehood. First of all, the report that Immani claims to have has been publicly repudiated.
Okay, wait. Where you got to is number 6 of their complaint.
Yeah, that's
where
they say the real meat. Yeah.
The real meat. The panel manipulated in some portions. They say they fraudulently manipulated their own scoring scheme to ensure that Afriwave came on top, regardless of the actual results, and they did so with a brazenness that is almost farcical. So they go to tell you that there were situations where the maximum mark to be scored is 1, yet Afriwave had 5.
Patently false.
There were places where
Samson, before you go on, you see, let me not let you waste your time.
There were places they had 4.
Samson,
when the maximum is
let me
1.
not let you waste your time. There is no such report
that
has these marks. The claims by Immani are patent lies. First of all, it doesn't even make sense, the claims they are making. In number 15, they are claiming that if you added all the marks, or if you subtracted what they claim was padded or added up to pad the marks of Afriwave, they would have gotten 67.2. It is false. If you check this report, it is on page 62, and this is the original report that I have. There is nowhere that they gave marks over and above.
Don't forget that Immani is also relying on
that report is patently false. You see, it doesn't make sense. If Immani's claims were to be accepted, it meant that Afriwave would have gotten 88%, not 67%. Again, mind you.
No, but is there not supposed to have been an earlier communication from the NCA admitting that, yes, this is our report, but there were transpositional errors.
You see, those errors.
So those have been corrected.
Those errors. The email was sent on the 28th of January, a day before the report was presented. But those errors were in respect of Sube's score. It was not to do with Afriwave.
So you agree that there were transpositional errors?
The kind of errors the NCA is speaking about is not what Immani is talking about. I'm telling you as a matter of fact that the Immani's claims that there's anywhere...
There is a big problem that the NCA will not be able to explain if it admits that these were merely transpositional errors because they were transferring from one point to another.
The reason why there was that raucous at the conference was that initially the NCA had thought that Immani was referring to the errors that they correct. And the mail is a Gmail account. You cannot fabricate it. It is there. They showed it to the journalists who were present. The errors were in respect of the column where Sube's marks should be, not where Afriwave's marks should be, as Immani is claiming.
So therefore, there's a doubt now on the documents Immani is holding.
It is not that there's a doubt. It is a fabricated document. If you look at the document they put out, yes, I'm saying it without reservation. You see, we are human beings. Okay, those are the ministry. Those who work at NCA, the panel members are human beings. They have built their reputations over time. It doesn't lie in the mouth of non-state actors to maliciously undermine their integrity without basis. I am saying that Immani is holding. It's a fabrication. The other point about the awards that were given, they were divided into two, like, what do you call it? Paul said, financials, technical, and then legal and management. Legal and management, the panel describes as beauty contest. That one, it is fairly easy to go through. Certificate of incorporation. So that one is there. But the critical components were financial.
On that point, and take a breather so we can have a.
The financial and what do you call it? Technical issues were the real facts. Now, the committee set out what criteria they will use. It is true that they asked for basically historical financials. What you have been doing in the past and how your books are, and current financials. And then there's a third leg, financing plan. In other words, how are you going to finance the ICT? That is the most critical.
That's right.
You understand me? Now, all the companies that came, if you assess their financial positions as of the time that the panel was evaluating their tenders, there was no way that on their own they could do it. So all of them came with partners. The partner for Afrowave was Huawei. And I don't need to tell you Huawei's stature in international telecommunications. The partners for Suba, according to them, was Ericsson.
Right.
But you know what? I have already read to you that the panel spoke about the time that you present documents.
That's right.
The panel made it clear that you must, and it is in the request for...
Yeah, we have noted that already.
So there's no point. They knew before they came.
So make
now,
the point.
The point I'm making is that in respect of Afriwave, they came with a valid agreement from Huawei that said that they were going to finance the project with debt or suppliers' credit, which means that Huawei will give them equipment and other incentives needed, and they will pay over time.
Right.
That was cast in stone in an agreement that predates the deadline. Suba said that they had a partnership with Ericsson. There was an Ericsson man sitting at the oral presentation.
Right.
When they were asked for documents, they presented a non-disclosure agreement, which is not an agreement between them in terms of partnership for financial or technical assistance. So they were asked to go and bring it. But they brought a document dated 13th January, one clear day after the deadline. And the committee had made it clear that if you bring documents after 12 January, they will not be considered.
That is
they
for
also,
the partnership. And for the bank that they sought,
that one too was
going to give them support. That one too was for 13th January 2015.
If you look at the results, Suba scored higher than Afriwave. When you come to equity, Suba said that they will use part equity, part loan. Equity means that your own money.
Right.
And then loan means that you go for support. And then they even had some parts where they said they will use debt as well, suppliers' credit. But there was no agreement between them and Ericsson. The committee cannot rely on speculation and word of mouth. They need evidence. Now, if you check the results, Suba got higher than Afriwave in financials because their equity position was stronger. But Afriwave did better when it came to debt because they showed proof that they had a credible, reliable, financially sound partner.
Okay,
that will give them
you stop
and
there
then,
for me.
And then the final point about technical. The same arguments hold for technical as well. Suba was not able to show evidence of its technical partnership with Ericsson. Afriwave was able to do that. And so they lost marks. I'm talking about Suba. They lost marks because of that. But Afriwave got it right. And that is why they scored higher. So the claim...
Okay, it is not fair to say Suba was not able to show.
Oh, but it is clear.
When it was demanded, they provided. But it was brought out of time.
But the point is that...
And so it was disregarded.
No, you see...
So I think we have to make that clear.
Let me land.
So it doesn't count.
It doesn't count.
Correct.
Because you must have had that partnership before the process ended.
Exactly. That point is made.
Yeah.
Now let's go to the phone lines and then... yes, it's important because they issued this statement.
Minutes.
No, don't worry. Wait. Let's go. He didn't speak for 30 minutes.
How many?
Patrick Stevenson is head, Center for Economic Governance and Political Affairs. Patrick, thank you very much for joining us on the phone. Hello, Patrick. Do I have Patrick on the line? Hello, Patrick.
Hello. Good.
Yes. Thanks for joining us, Patrick.
Thank you for having me, Tamsin.
Great. You've been listening, and thanks for your patience. You've been listening to Felix. How do you react to the manner in which he completely, as it were,
there's no basis for it.
Sorry, that might sound prejudicial, but this is my job. Sometimes the devil's advocate, I need to play it. He seems to have completely damaged your report as not credible.
Something. Let me first of all begin by saying a very good morning to your listeners and the people of this country. When you say that the deputy minister has damaged the reports, I find that quite strange.
He's picked every point. He's picked every point and demonstrated by his arguments and what he shows by the documents that these claims are invalid and they are false. In fact, he calls them a pack of lies.
First of all, let me say that in terms of the contract evaluation, for instance, by the time Afriwave was awarded the contract, it hadn't signed any agreement with Huawei or any of the companies or partners that it intended to. Indeed, that the purported Huawei deal happened December 15th, clearly a year after Afriwave had won the contract. Okay. Secondly, the contracts with Sagos and the other companies and Laurentian, for example, were being negotiated as late as November last year. And so when these contracts are now being negotiated over 10 months after the company has been awarded the contract, I wonder the basis on which Felix, for example, advances the argument that the company had demonstrated 70% Ghanaian ownership as at the time they were being awarded the contract.
Okay, so do I now understand you to say? That you dispute the report because the report says what Felix said?
Yeah.
Dispute which report? The report that we put out. I don't
specific.
of the report.
No, hold on. Specific. The specific point I'm making here is that you are saying that Afriwave got into contracts with Huawei belatedly, long after it had been awarded. So is that the suggestion that the panel, sort of manufactured those assessments for them?
But is that not what it suggests? I mean, that's clearly what it suggests, because if it is a requirement for the company to have that kind of engagement to demonstrate its ability to execute, and that contract didn't exist at the time, then what was the basis for the evaluation panels awarding those scores on that particular indicator? Okay. Now, it should be put on record that Afrowave itself didn't have the capacity to run the services that it was being awarded the contract for. It had three other companies that it was going to help, that were going to help it to undertake the interconnected monitoring activities. Okay, and so clearly, on a basis, will the company, for example, score 39.5% out of the 40 that is available for technical competences? Clearly,
you say Afriwave. You say Afriwave did not have the capacity. Was there a company that had the capacity to run an ICH?
Something. The point is that we are not against any of the companies that bid.
Kindly answer that question first. You isolate Afriwave and say they did not have the capacity. Was there a company that bidded at the point that had the capacity, clearly speaking, that could do the job?
Well, as far as the evaluation report that has been presented suggests, if you make adjustments for the scores, clearly Afriwave was not going to be the company that came on top. But our concern is really not about any of these specific companies. It's about the process that appeared to have been smugged in all kinds of unsavory activities that masked the procurement process and the entire evaluation process, which we think has got to be redone.
Okay.
I mean, the crux of the matter really is the attempt by the NCA to, as it were, impose one institution to do this, to undertake this interconnect clearinghouse services. I think what we need to really do as a country is to clearly put in context what is happening across other jurisdictions, to be able to evaluate whether or not this makes sense and adds value to the regulatory process, and at the end of it, equally adds value to the telecom industry. Running a clearinghouse, I should say, in every country is really about operations and not a matter of regulation. And I'll explain that. If you go to Nigeria, for example, in the telecom industry, they have about 5 licensed clearinghouses, okay? And about 2 of these clearinghouses have been deemed as very competent by the telcos. Bear in mind, this interconnected activity we're talking about here is something that's going to be undertaken for telcos. And so the telcos equally have an interest as far as this activity is concerned, okay? And so in Nigeria, you have 5 different companies that undertake such an activity and competitively, drive value for that particular industry and the regulatory processes in Nigeria. What the NCA seems to be doing is something that has been done in the Philippines. And to tell you the truth, the Philippines have backtracked on this as far back as 2001. And so there is an antecedent for us as a country to follow, that people have gone down this trajectory. It has failed technically, and so we should not go there.
Okay, so wait, just hold on. Now, that is a different argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
It completely has nothing to do with the credibility of the process that's been completed that you are questioning. It is the case that you favor, you say there should be a number of them, at least 3, rather than give a monopoly to one entity. And the NCA doesn't buy your argument.
Samson, so let me clarify the issues that we raised, which I think Felix has not been able to respond to. Okay? Now, when you say that Afriwave, for example, won scores for being 70% Ghanaian owned, right? Now that they are virtually outsourcing every aspect of the operation to 3 different companies, okay? What is the point of favoring a local contractor then? I mean, this is a clear issue as far as the evaluation process is concerned that they've not been able to explain. Why are we going to take money from telcos and pay out to 3 foreign companies, which we are outsourcing every function that the Afrowave appears to be?
Stevenson, sorry, but what you're talking about is a legal compliance.
Exactly.
And in the legal compliance, all the panel was expected to do was to ask the question, let us see your incorporation documents. And if the incorporation document said the shareholders are Ghanaians, that was the end of the story. You are saying they should have demanded more than that.
There is a reason. I'm expecting the company that is going to provide this service to be Ghanaian owned. There's a reason which has got to be demonstrated. So you have demonstrated that legally by presenting documents. But at the end of the day, every activity that is going to be undertaken as far as service provision is concerned is foreign owned. That is the primary question. And if you look comprehensively at the report that has been provided, look, there are lots of inconsistencies. That I think
but wait, just wait, finish this point. Afriwave was going to outsource almost all, and so that is a big issue about its Ghanaian, ownership for you. Which of the companies that bidded was not going to outsource?
Yes.
Which of the companies that bidded was not going to outsource any of the functions?
Yes, please.
Well, if the criteria is, that's why I'm saying that our concern is not with any of the companies per se.
Okay, you're not answering that question.
We're not against Afrowave winning. It could have been Suba Info Solutions. It could have been any of the Prodigy. It could have been any of the companies. But the point is that to the extent that they can show a certain percentage of Ghanaian ownership and every function that they are going to undertake is going to be outsourced, then what is the point of the Ghanaian ownership that we're advocating for? I think that's the point. So it could have been Suba Info Solutions, it could have been Project, and this is a procedural issue.
Okay.
It's not an issue against any of the companies. So it so happens that in this case, it is Afriwave who has won the contract, so we happen to be mentioning Afriwave. But if it is Suba, the argument will still have been the same. It's a substance argument, not a form argument.
Okay, there's a serious charge of, we don't have sufficient time for my guests in the studio. There's a serious charge of the document you are dealing with being a fabrication, according to the deputy minister. This is a very serious allegation. What do you say to it?
Well, it is interesting because what will be our interest in going to fabricate a document? I mean, now let me explain this. As far as the schedule for the evaluations are concerned, the report of the technical committee was supposed to have been finished by 23rd January. Now, that report, if you look at that email communication that was shown by the technical committee, they had recognized as far as 28th January that in their work, there were inconsistencies in marks that we can always debate when they were copied from Excel spreadsheets, which we equally find strange. But they saw that on 28th January. They corrected these before submitting final document to the NCA on 29th of January. Now, if that committee is supposed to be independent in its job, Samson, at no point between 23rd and 28th should that purported erroneous document be submitted to the NCA, which will be signed by the NCA, and that is going to be available to us. That's not going to be the case. The only report, in fact, that will be with the NCA will be the document that is submitted on the 29th. Okay. And so if the NCA itself admits in the initial communication that, yes, this is a report they saw, this is a report that they have, and they had corrected these errors. In what capacity did the NCA correct these errors? Okay. How are we going to fabricate? This is not a fabricated document. That clearly happens to be sub.
Thank you, Stephen, Patrick Stevenson. My guest in the studio will take the rest of the 20 minutes to continue. Hold on, Felix. Hold on, Felix. Hold on. Patrick Stevenson, please hold on. Patrick Stevenson is head Center for Economic Governance and Political Affairs, and you just heard him also try to make the point that with the Immani, trying to make the point that the claims that Felix is making in rebutting or their statement are incorrect. Yeah. Now let me come back here and Kweku, if I may start with you. Here we are. I think there are others who think genuinely that Suba Info Solutions in the past few months has shown some sterling leadership in the component of the ICH job that it is doing as an indigenous Ghanaian entity. I understand it has a contract which is supposed to expire sometime very soon, a couple of months or so. In May. Yeah. I mean, what it means then is that now that Afrowave has gotten this, they are going to lose that job. You know, people are going to be laid off, all of these. I mean, why the difficulty in not considering that they have been in the system and they have done a good job, so they should continue?
Well, I think that, if we are not careful, you begin to mention names of the companies that took part in the tendering and things. You look as if it's a battle between the companies.
The statement by Immani says Suba should win. And so that's what the argument has been.
No, that's their choice.
Okay.
They decide to frame their point that way. I want to look at whether indeed principles, the correct procedures and principles were adhered to.
It was. Now let's listen to Kweku.
You see, and I don't pretend I know much, or that I have the competence to understand all these issues. But just sitting here, certain things are hitting my mind.
Okay.
Look, transpositional errors. What animal is that? What is that?
Figures put around the same thing, changed to go to other places.
I don't know whether you want. Is it, for instance? You have 50 in Excel sheets. You want to transfer it to, and then
this rhetorical. Let him continue.
Right. Take your time. You have 30 minutes.
We are being told today that this document is fabricated.
Yes.
Where is the authentic one?
I have it. It's with me. That's what I'm using.
Why don't you give it to everybody?
So why did?
But why? If you didn't have the right document,
sorry,
why did you go and purport to
Felix,
it?
I beg you, please, hold on.
When we are dealing with such issues, the NCA, I expected the NCA, instead of providing what they call the email correspondence, to have provided that authentic document.
You mean they didn't provide this at the press conference?
Did they?
They didn't.
No, I thought they were showing.
They were showing.
Okay.
They said they don't have a copy.
Okay.
That's not the way
right.
to. That is not the way to inform the population.
Okay.
No.
Please,
the public needs information.
Okay. So good question. Where's the original one?
Yes, where is the original? So that we can interrogate. Right. I see this markings here. Score per criterion, where it's 2. I see Afriwave has been given 4. I want somebody, and that is supposed to be a fabrication. So who did this fabrication? Where did it come from? Now I see the signature at the tail end of the director, is it the director general of the chairman of the board? No, yes, the chairman. I see. No, it's the chairman rather. No, Bonnie.
Okay.
It says this recommendation by the ACP Application Evaluation Panel has been accepted and approved by the board. Now, is this handwriting indeed that of the chairman of the board?
It's easy to tell.
Is the signature his? Dated 30th January 2015.
Right.
Is it his? You see, we need to look at all this. If there is dispute, or this is also fabrication, the write-up here and the signature are all fabrications? Are they part of the fabrications?
Because
this
why
can
you're
be
asking this
subjected
question
to
is
follow.
that because now what they claim is that the transpositional errors they sought to correct
It's not even what-
it's in respect of another document, but not what we are holding.
Yeah, but you see,
And that's what makes it interesting. Is the
Felix-
signature his? Is the writing his?
yes,
is it-
this
is
are-
it-
no,
is it-
Felix,
is it-
please.
okay,
You
all
made,
right,
and Felix
hold on,
made a
hold on,
statement
hold on.
in making the submission. He made a point about the email thing had something to do with Suba.
Exactly. That
Now
is
listen to
corrected.
what the NCA said.
Yeah.
It says the NCA is in the preparation of the report, transpose the scores from Excel to Microsoft Word, and noticed that there were some transpositional errors which were corrected to correspond with the original Excel scores. We are not sure where Immani got the information from, and we would like to plead with the general public to ensure that they get their information from the right sources,
Yeah.
in this case from the NCA. Suba is not mentioned here.
Yes. Yes, but it doesn't mean
No,
that
it is wrong.
You see, no, but
You see, no,
Please,
listen,
Felix, hold it.
listen,
hold
you
it.
want to convince
Please hold
us.
it, yeah.
You want to convince us.
Just let me convince you.
No, let's do it.
No,
One step
but you
by
see,
step.
why should
Step
he
by
take?
step.
Why should he take the deputy minister for communications to be the one coming to clarify things and do things?
The
NCA as an
panel
authority.
clarified it
Wait,
at the press
wait,
conference.
yes.
The panel clarified it.
They
went
clarified
into-
You see,
they
Kweku
went
has
into
asked
their
a
private
question,
mail.
a very substantive, legitimate question.
That
The document that is claimed to be a fabrication, you say
it is.
fabrication.
Yes.
The signature on it, the writing saying the recommendation is accepted and approved. Does it belong to the board chair who signed? Is that his signature? These are questions to be
But
asked
some-
because
Use-
it has been established that the alleged transpositional errors are an impossibility if this is the document.
But Samson, if I may come in. One, Franklin Kujo has claimed, he's on record. Listen.
I'm making my case here.
Samson will not
you see,
solve this
I'm
matter.
answering that question.
This is not a trial.
I'm not making a case for Frank.
Samson, this is not a trial.
Yes.
There
We're
isn't
not
much
a trial.
let me
Yeah, there is a
come
master.
in. There's no much. Because you
It's not a
see,
dialogue.
see,
Fine, go ahead. I thought that Samson was
so
asking the
me,
question. That's why.
I was out there. I wanted to be convinced.
Yes.
I remain unconvinced
That's
by the explanations offered by the NCA.
Correct.
And what I have seen here raises issues of credibility and integrity deficit.
on whose part?
NCA.
How so? Because Immani
Because
says so.
what it will mean is that this document, the figures that are claimed to be transpositional, were inserted by somebody else.
No, but
Yes.
you see,
And-
those
and
figures,
yet signed,
Samson,
yeah.
those
authenticated.
those figures won't make, they don't make sense.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yes, so what's the point?
Well, they don't make sense, but they are there.
They are there.
No, but Samson,
And-
what
and
is
we
to
are
be
being
gained?
told-
Samson, what is to be gained
You
by
see,
the NCE
we have
by
to be-
putting in figures that are not.
I don't
Okay, so what you're saying
Exactly.
is that what you're saying
It
is
doesn't make
that
sense.
what you're saying is that a mischief maker
Absolutely,
who wanted
inserted
to,
that.
to put this one out
Inserted
took the
that.
original
Okay.
statement
Inserted
and then
that.
inserted wrong
So
figures.
let's find out. Let's find out the authentic one.
He hasn't got the
Do we
signature.
have this
No,
signature and the statement by the
Of course, listen.
commissioner there? Do
Listen,
we have
listen
it?
to me. No,
I'm just-
no.
It's not there.
It's not there.
Wow.
Listen to me. Listen, Kweku,
It's
listen to
full-
me.
If it's not there,
You see,
then there's a
Kweku,
problem
Kweku,
somewhere.
Kweku, listen to me. Kweku,
Because if it was there, they would say that somebody
Listen.
manipulated the figures
listen.
and kept this one here.
Listen,
Because see,
Kweku,
all the panel members
yeah.
have signed.
Felix,
He hasn't
Felix,
got
Felix.
it.
Oh, no. Is it Kweku, listen?
So perhaps
Kweku,
we
listen
need
to me.
forensic
Kweku, listen to me.
investigation.
Kweku, listen to me.
I think you have a point.
Listen
now,
to me.
now, wait. Let me hear Doc.
I'm pleading
Yeah.
with you that when my brother was
Oh, I want
talking,
to interrupt.
You go ahead.
I am not going to talk about Suba
Oh,
nor
Afrowave.
Afrowave because I don't know them. I want to put on record that this process the Ministry of Communication has taken is fraudulent.
That is false.
What's
Please,
the evidence?
It's
Yes,
NCA. Okay, I see where
It's
it's
NCA.
I see where it's. I want to concentrate.
Ministry. I have tons of documents as correspondence between the Ministry of Finance to prove to you. You see, in the policy cycle, you identify a gap, you write out a policy, approve the policy, you go ahead and provide legislation to support that policy and give it to the regulator to implement. Right?
Yeah.
As we speak, there is no legislation in this country to back what they claim.
That's
Okay, that's a matter in court. Sorry.
It is not
They are seeking amendments.
It's a matter in court.
Gentlemen, let's have doctor proceed.
I'm a parliamentarian. I'm a parliamentarian.
Wait. Felix.
It is not true that
Felix, hold on. Let's hear Doc.
I even have a copy, a soft copy of the supposed legislation they want to bring.
Okay.
I even have a copy. They haven't brought it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, the whole ICH is a fabrication to give a contract to somebody, which is not necessarily called a license. The regulator doesn't need a license to perform his functions. He needs legislation to perform his license. And this work that is purportedly being done by ICH or whoever they call it ICH can be done by the regulator without any problem.
NCO.
NCA,
Yeah.
that is the regulator. Okay. If NCA had the capacity to do it, that is the job of NCA to do. They don't need to give it to any line. And you don't need a license. Again, I want to put on record that all the single elements that constitute the 40, the only one that is not being performed or cannot be performed by NCA or for that ministry is the revenue assurance.
Okay.
It's not true.
Let me tell you.
Suba
The
is doing
Hold on, Felix.
The
Felix, hold on.
NCA, the laws in this country doesn't give NCA the power or the Ministry of Communication the power to do revenue assurance. It is only the GRA, Ghana Revenue Authority, and the Ministry of Finance. Okay. The whole law that when the Ministry of Communication went to Cabinet, it went to assure Cabinet that the revenue will be protected. It is not the Ministry of Communication job to assure Cabinet that revenue will be protected. It's the Ministry of Finance. So even the Cabinet memo they took to Cabinet, I have a copy here. Part of it is also fraudulent.
7 December.
Yes, 7.
No, but
Take your
why have we said
Take your time and
that
take
it is our
me
job to
through
collect
these
money? We haven't said so, have
documentations
we?
on the basis of which you are saying this process is a fraud.
Well, I've said that there's no legislation.
Okay,
We
that
disagree.
point has been made. Go ahead.
That the Ministry of Finance itself has written to the NCA that what you are doing is dangerous because as we speak in this country now, there is no legislation.
What has been the
to back
NCA's response?
You have made that point. Can we move
Even
on?
the communication service tax.
Okay.
The communication service tax.
No, but you are talking
that
about
they
an
put
entirely different set of issues, not the issue we
the
are discussing.
communication service tax.
It's
The
an entirely
communication
different set of
service
issues.
tax.
What is this, Doc?
I don't know its
There's a
relevance
public
with it.
Yes, you decide what is it. What is it?
This is policy approval for the Electronic Communication Amendment Bill and approval for the Electronic Communication Amendment Bill to be laid in Parliament. And this was the 11th of December, 2015.
Hold on. So 1 year after the supposedly somebody had won a license, 1 year.
Provisional license.
Wait, I'm not even coming to that. 1 year after somebody had won a tender, 1 year in January, you are going at the end of the year to seek authorization for legislation to enable you do what you are doing. Because when you
it is a matter.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
You allow
that. Because his own minister's signature is telling Cabinet that they need the legislation to do what they are supposed to do. So the license they purportedly gave Afrowave in June was a provisional
the
license.
entire process.
Yes, it was not based upon any legislation.
Yes, okay.
So in June, they purportedly gave Afriwave a provisional license to do what that was done in legislation. So they go back, and in that license, I have a copy here. They said that it is only for 6 months. That also ends in January, which has even elapsed. So as we speak, there's no legislation, and there's no provisional winner because nobody even has a license to do that. When you go again to do the revenue assurance, the only legitimate body to do revenue assurance is the Ministry of Finance. That is why Samson, recently, you heard the ministry coming with energy service tax, right? Energy levy. It was not the Ministry of Energy that came with energy levy. It was the Ministry of Finance. The constitution we operate and the laws in Ghana gives only the Minister of Finance the power to come even with fees and charges. So when the communication service tax they want to amend, this cabinet memo was not a joint memo.
And a major part of it actually said, legislative plan, it says that the introduction of the clearinghouse will require an amendment to Section 20 of the Electronic Communication Act 2008, Act 775, and consideration of the communication service tax, blah, blah, the communication service tax, and so on and so forth. So the point clearly is that this was a cabinet memo, okay, that sought approval for this to be done before the process that we have had concluded and questioned.
The reason why I'm saying that it's fraudulent is that the policy cycle, you start with the evidence, you identify a gap. The gap is that interconnection is done by telcos themselves. You now want to change to single. I don't mind. So you've gone to cabinet as far back as August 2014 to take in that power to do it. Once cabinet gives you that power, you go ahead and amend the legislation. The Ministry of Communication cannot come and amend the communication service tax. It's the Ministry of Finance.
That's right.
Actually, when you read the communication service tax, let me read one point. It is not only one.
Can we establish here now that when you say this whole thing is fraud, this is what you meant?
And I'm coming to
that's the end of your story.
I'm even coming to
your story is the lack of legislation.
Not only
that is an entirely separate issue, which
one.
we contest.
The Ministry of Finance, in writing to them, to the Ministry NCA, the Ministry of Finance writing to NCA. I have one letter here. You realize that the tax policy advisor to the minister. It is my humble advice that the NCA.
This letter was written when?
8 September. 8 months, 9 months after the yes. He said, it is my humble of you after all that. He said, let me read the relevant portion. He said, may I humbly remind you that the communication revenue in question here is a tax revenue which is captured under the Communication Service Act 2008. Tax revenue falls directly under the purview of the Minister of Finance. Section 4 of Act 875. All other tax laws categorically places the administration, management, collection, and accounting of the tax under GRA. When you come, it must also be stated that the implementation of ICA does not in any way oust the Ministry of GRA's mandate to collect and account for tax resources. So when after you have even done all your ICH, they can still let Suba operate. Then you come to
this communication that suggests that there is a certain feud between the finance ministry and the communication ministry as far as the ICH is concerned.
I didn't interrupt. Wait. I didn't interrupt. I'll come. My last thing is that it is said that it is my humble opinion that NCA should concentrate on building the architecture for the implementation of ICH, since the law to implement ICH is still being drafted.
That's right.
Parliament is on recess till end of October, and the court case is still continuing.
Hold on 1 minute. Felix, he had asked a question about the original document you hold, which is Kweku has questions about.
I haven't finished.
He asked, hold on. He asked about the signature.
Is it something?
Wait. Napo looked at the document and said there was no signature.
Is it something?
No, hold on. You agree that it is not signed.
Is it something? Let me make a point.
No, straight. I want a direct answer. I want a direct answer. Is there a signature to that? Is it signed? It's not signed,
listen,
correct?
There's one document, okay?
It's not signed.
That is presented to the board, which is signed. Listen.
What you hold now, which you say is the original, the correct document, is not signed.
What I hold is a report.
Keep it.
What I hold is a report.
Okay.
That was prepared by the committee. It's the same thing they presented to the board.
But this is not signed.
So
There's no
This is not signed.
You are committing a fraud.
Listen.
It's not signed.
If you are coming to debate this issue, you bring a document that is not signed.
Okay. Wait. I just needed this from you. Wait, 1 minute. It's not signed. You agree.
Listen to me.
Now hold on. 1 minute.
I have 2 points to make.
Hold on. We are not finished. What do you want to be done?
The 14 points.
What do you want to be done?
The 14 points that he listed. The 14 points. I can tell you as we speak, Super does every single one but one.
It is not true.
But what?
Which is the but one that
you see,
doesn't
let me tell you.
The interconnect.
Wait.
The interconnect.
Yes,
that's why it doesn't.
Interesting.
When you want
But the telcos already do this. The question that is that the telcos already do the interconnect. Why do we need a centralized monopoly?
All I'm even assuming I'll give the government the ability to change policy. But what I'm telling you that before Suba can do the work that it's doing for GRE, it should be able to monitor all the other 30. If it doesn't, the government cannot be assured of revenue.
No, it's only fair.
Okay.
You see,
Okay. We have run out of time. We have run out of time. But
it's only fair that you give it the opportunity.
I'm going to finish my submission.
You didn't allow time. You didn't allow us to
the
raised an
two
issue
major
that
points. Can you just raise them? The two major last points you said you have to raise. Just raise them.
Yes. All the 40 that you
This is
say,
interesting.
all the 40. I have documents to show that even real time is being done by Suba because government wants a revenue reassurance. And I'm saying that after they are finished with everything, even if they give the contract to Afriwave, the Ministry of Finance and GRE can still insist on Suba because government revenue reassurance is only guaranteed by GRE. So no matter what Ministry of Communication and for this matter is surrogate, the NCA puts in place.
You are in Parliament. What do you seek to do?
With the amendments they are seeking.
You are in Parliament. What do you seek to do?
No.
What do you seek to do? You are in Parliament. What do you seek to do?
No, let me finish. You are not Parliament.
Okay,
It's not
let me say this.
we are
Ignore him.
contesting
Talk
the
to me. What do you seek to do? You are in Parliament.
We cannot
For
comment.
the first time,
What do you seek to do?
for the first time,
Please, stop.
All right,
Go
all
ahead.
right.
Let's hear you.
Because we've got to raise a conclusion can get some.
Who sent it to court?
It is the
There's a
MPP
matter
that-
in court about the
It's
aspect
MPP
of the
that-
legislation. Let's put that aside. Yes.
I haven't even mentioned court. The Ministry of Finance, in their letter to Cabinet and to Ministry of Communication, says 4 things. They said since we are in contract with IMF, revenues must be assured. And no matter what the Ministry of Communication and NCA does, we have to satisfy the revenue assurance. So after everything, they can still continue with Suba, irrespective of your license. Because the regulator doesn't need license to operate what it's supposed to do. That is one. It says, secondly, the communication service tax that you purportedly went to Cabinet to seek permission is under the purview of the Ministry of Finance.
Yeah.
It's not under your
It
purview.
says the Ministry of Finance
Okay.
in collaboration.
And so
the main minister is the Ministry of Finance.
I have said repeatedly
can we conclude
that
on
we
this
are
note?
challenging that
What-
position.
All I'm saying
should
is
be
that
done? What
yes,
should be
all
done?
I'm
So it's not
saying
a
is
final
that
decision.
Wait.
all I'm saying is that
Yes, 20 seconds.
Yes,
20 seconds. What
I
should be
want to
done?
be sure.
Felix, hold on. Felix, hold on. 20
Yes.
seconds. What should be done?
This has the same effect. The AG who was consulted, that we are likely to have a judgment debt on what we are doing. This same thing is the exact
AG has said
of
no
what
such
happened to Bank Switch and the
The
DIC.
AG
What
has
should
said
be
no
done?
such
What should be done is that the president, if he is listening, if he wants peace in this country, if he wants revenue to be assured, should step in and stop this fraudulent so-called Ministry of Communication thing.
You are saying the president is unaware of
I'm
everything
telling
up to
you,
this
if the
point.
president is aware, that is even more dangerous.
Samson.
That's why I said they went to Cabinet to
we
ask.
categorically
Yes, 30
reject,
seconds,
we
30 seconds,
categorically
yeah.
reject the post-claim that what we have done with the ICH is fraudulent.
Fraudulent.
2,
There's no legislative
the
backing.
claims made by Immani are patently false, as I have demonstrated point by point. 3, the report that I hold is not different from what the panel presented.
The unsigned
No,
report.
signed
No, it's only a copy of the report that I hold.
Copy, you don't
But
do
there's
sign
one
it.
signed
Copy the page that
by
is
the
signed.
board chairman that is accurate, that does not contain the claims
That's the
Immani
one
is making.
Kweku has.
Exactly.
That's the
But
one
again,
Kweku has.
I have told you that the claims Immani are making
But you
do
agree
not
there is a controversy that is unresolved.
about
The document that
Is it
Immani is
Samson?
holding.
Is it Samson?
It's a signed one.
signature.
Final point.
Yes.
Final point. Immani claims, and Franklin Video is on record, that the document was given him by a member of the panel. The members
They
of the
signed
panel.
non-disclosure.
Oh, listen, please. The members of the panel were at the press conference.
They've denied
They
that.
publicly disowned it.
But they have signed the non-disclosure.
If they do that, they're going to jail.
He didn't get us a document.
No. But by Immani's claims, they have scandalized the members of the panel.
Oh.
They have a right to defend themselves. They have publicly repudiated this.
But why
report.
does
So
it
it is up to Immani.
where is the
It
legislation?
is up to Immani
Right.
to show that indeed that document came
Well,
from the person
do
who
the
claimed it's
finish the
coming.
legislation.
But that's
So
like the guy
they
defended
broke
it.
the
I keep on telling you.
Yeah, so Immani is claiming that the guy
I
broke.
didn't come there
But
because
it is
of
not fair to
Afriwave
the
or
other
Afriwave.
members because once you say that, you scandalize all of them unfairly.
Okay.
And they have publicly stated so. So let the one dissenting publicly state that This was what happened. But I'm telling you for a fact.
The Ministry of
that
Finance is not happy with what
their claims are false.
Okay, I get that point.
job.
I get that point. We are running out of that time.
Yeah.
You see, I was asking about the signature because it's important. You say it's not signed. First, it's not signed by the members.
And then the
second,
bottom-
it's
no,
not
no,
signed
it's
by
only
the
a copy
board
of-
chair.
listen.
But
The
that's
one
serious.
which is
But that's
claimed,
serious.
the one which is claimed
This is
fraudulent
fraudulent.
is signed by the members and
something
is signed by the
happened.
board
Something.
chair.
Why you are suggesting?
No, it's
that-
important
No,
point.
listen. You are suggesting that there is no document signed by the board.
So where is that
document? Listen,
Okay.
it is in the possession of the NCA.
So-
They will make it available. So
Okay.
it's not-
They don't have
They should
it.
have made
Okay,
it available at the
let's
press
get that.
conference.
That's
in an
okay.
after
So by the
talk.
press
Thank you,
conference-
thank you,
at the
gentlemen.
press
I'm
conference,
sorry,
they spoke-
Mohammed from
They
Paul,
gave
we
you
didn't
the
get
document.
your
They gave you
views
the
on this.
background.
That's
But
why
Why
I'm just
didn't
trying to
you bring the
understand.
side
Oh, but
document?
it's not my document. I don't know.
Okay, so sorry. This is where we end the show.
It's
Thank
only
you
a
very
document.
much. This discussion certainly will continue.